back to the 5-Minute Tech channel. Today we will continue on our journey on learning Polyglot microservice architecture and full stack based development around it. The second part is around securing microservices with Identity Server, OpenID Connect and OAuth 2.0. So this is the full-fledged implementation in which we will be implementing our identity server using Duendi Identity Server. We'll use OpenID Connect and the OAuth 2.0 to not only authenticate and authorize our client-side application, but also the microservices, especially the user management service which we will be working. So let's get started, which we are building up on, and we have the specific area which we'll be working on today, which is the identity server, OpenID and OAuth 2. This is the area which we will be working on, wherein we will be integrating the identity server which will work on the OpenID Connect, and OAuth 2 will develop our user management service around it. So let's get started. So what is OAuth 2.0? OAuth 2.0 is the industry standard protocol for authorization. OAuth 2.0 focuses on client developer simplicity while providing specific authorization flows for web applications. This specification and its extension are being developed within the IETF OAuth working group, and this designs all the principles around this protocol. OAuth 2.0 flow. We have a client which does the authorization request to the resource owner, and it gets authorization grant, followed by it asks for the authorization grant to the authorization server, receives the access token, and the resource server provides it the protected resource after it accepts the access token. So the client requests authorization from the resource owner. The authorization request can be made directly to the resource owner or preferably indirectly via the authorization server as an intermediary. The client receives the authorization grant, which is the credential representing the resource owner's authorization, expressed using one or more 4 grant types defined in the specification or using an extension grant type. The authorization grant type depends on the method used by the client to request authorization and the types supported by the authorization server. The client requests an access token by authenticating with the authorization server and presenting the authorization grant. And then the authorization server authenticates the client and validates the authorization grant, and if valid, issues an access token. The client requests the protected resource from the resource server using that access token. The resource server validates the access token, and if valid, the server serves the requests. So that is the complete flow of OAuth 2.0. What is OpenID Connect? OpenID Connect is an interoperable authentication protocol. It is based on the OAuth 2.2, so it is a superior protocol, and it is based on OAuth 2.0 framework of specifications. It simplifies the way to verify identity of user based on the authentication performed by an authorization server and to obtain user profile information in an interoperable and REST-like manner. So what is OpenID Connect flow? The end user which navigates to the website or web application via a browser, and then the user probably clicks sign in type of username and password he enters there. The relying party, that is the client, sends a request to the OpenID provider, that is some provider like your in our case it will be Duendi server identity server. The OpenID provider authenticates the user and obtains the authorization, and the OpenID provider responds with an identity token, usually an access token also with the identity token. And the relying party that is the client, can send a request with the access token to the user device. The user info endpoint returns the claims about the end user. So this is the complete OpenID Connect flow. We will be talking more in detail when we implement the code around it. Now, what is the difference between OIDC, that is OpenID Connect, and the OAuth 2.0? OIDC was built on top of OAuth 2.0 to add authentication. The OAuth 2.0 protocol was developed first, and then the OIDC was added to enhance its capability. The difference between the two is that OAuth 2.0 provides authorization, while as OIDC provides authentication. OAuth 2.0 is what allows user to gain access to the relying party using their account with an OpenID provider and OIDC is what allows OpenID provider to pass along a user profile to the relying party. OIDC also allows the organization to offer their users single sign-on. So these are the differences between the two. Now we also talk about the Duende Identity Server. Previously it was known as Identity Server 4, but recently it has been renamed as Duende Identity Server. It is a robust framework for implementing OpenID Connect and OAuth 2.0 standard in ASP.NET Core applications. And as I mentioned, it was previously known as Identity Server 4. Now Duende Identity Server, we will be using it has a multiple jobs and features which we will be implementing in our application. First is managing access to the resources, authenticating user using a local account store or via an external identity provider. In our case, we'll be using a local account store, and provide a session management and single sign-on, manage and authenticate clients, and issue identity and access token to the client. So this will be the implementation around Duende Identity Server, which we will be using in our Book My Boat application. Now, what is authorization code? Authorization code is a very short-lived token that provides the proof of authentication linked to the user that just signed into the identity provider. So here is an example of authorization code flow. We have the relying party or someone like a user or application on the client side. An authentication request is submitted by that particular user or the relying party to the identity provider. Identity provider can be thought of something which is having some credentials, so the user details and all those things which it will use to identify the user. Now the authorization endpoint is what is hit by the relying party or the client. User is authenticated based on the credentials he has provided, and user gives also a consent after it is authenticated by the identity provider. Now it returns a code. That code is something which is passed as a part of a token request back to the token endpoint to get the token request, and then there is a token identity token which is passed by the identity provider to the client. And now there are certain problems in the authorization code flow. What if the malicious user gets access to the code which we just talked about? So that's why there is a proof key for code exchange implementation. Authorization code injection attack can be mitigated with the PKCE. We call it PKCE. That is proof key for code exchange approach. For each request to auth endpoint, a secret is created, and when calling the token endpoint, it is verified. So there is a secret which is used to identify that the correct user is asking for the token. Code injection is mitigated because attacker does not have the access to the per request secret. Now this is the authorization code flow with the PKCE protection. Here, in which the relying party creates a code identifier, a hash SHA-256 code challenge, and passes the authentication request with that code challenge to the authorization endpoint. Now the code challenge is stored and the user is authenticated, and user gives the consent that this is all me, and code is passed to the client. The token request is then created by the client with the code, client ID, client secret, and code verifier, now and passed on to the token endpoint. Now the code verifier is hashed and it is checked if it matches the stored code challenge, and then the identity token is passed back to the user or the application and stored in a cookie. So this is the PKCE protection which we are talking about through a code challenge. Now authorization code flow with PKCE protection and also the passing the user information. So basically it remains the same as we just talked about in the PKCE protection. Apart from that, there is something called as user info request at the bottom you're seeing, wherein the access token is also being passed. So access token is something which will be used by the user to get the API responses from the backend services, and then that is passed as a user info request as an access token. The user info endpoint is something which will be accessed through that, and then the user will get its claim information as well. So this was the complete flow of the authorization code flow with PKCE protection and also with the user information involved. So now let's get into the actual implementation, wherein we'll be starting from a fresh application and implementing all these logics which we just talked about. So here am I in the Visual Studio, and we'll go ahead and create a blank solution first. So let me go ahead and add a new blank solution. Now in the empty solution, I'll go ahead and add a new folder, which is the user management, because this is the module which we'll be working on. So user management, and in this folder I'll go ahead and add 2-3 projects. The first project will be ASP.NET Core Web API. The second one will be the client project, which is the MVC Web API, ASP.NET Core Web App. The third one will be a class library for my models. So I'll go ahead and add that. And so we'll go ahead and wire up the code for the base application for the user management module. So I've gone ahead and created a user management database which has 3 tables: user, user bookings, and user profile. These are the 3 tables which we'll be using. So I will be using a reverse engineer tool called EF Power Tools to generate the code around this. So let me go ahead and generate the code from the database. So let me add the database connection, select the user management here, and go ahead and generate the code. So this EF Power Tools has generated me all the layers: the user object, the user booking, the user profile, and the context. I'll be moving the user management context to the API project. So let's do that now. So I moved the class to the user management API project. I'll go ahead and add the dependencies here, including the entity framework core. I've added all the references, and now this context class seems to be fine. Let's go ahead and wire up the user object to the controller now. So here is my full structure. I have a user management controller. Controller has a injection towards user management repository, and that user management repository is then used to fetch the details from the database. So the way it will work is, if you try to get all bookings, I'll go to user management repository, and what we will do is we'll get all the user bookings from there. So in the repository, if you go here, you will be able to see that we are getting from the user bookings table all the things from here. So that is how it is, and let's try and plug in the code for the client now, the user management client. So I've gone ahead and done the middleware piping as well, wherein I have added the user management API in the app settings for the endpoint on which my API project is running. From the app settings, I have grabbed that. The API project app setting is updated to use the connection DB for this database, and then we also have added the client. The client is where we have created the client factory, and we are calling a specific API called get bookings for all the bookings actually for now, and we are going to list it into the UI, and the UI being your home index page, we'll get all the booking related details here. And also we have a view model which will be serving the view, the index view of the home, and the home controller is somewhere we'll be calling the get all the bookings. So here I have just make this available in the interface properly. So something is not right here. Actually I have not put in the injection, so let me do that and get the client, and let me inject it. Client, so that should be good now. Let's build and run this. Our solution is building fine. I will go ahead and run this application now. For that we will have to set up multiple startup projects. So let's do that. Startup projects should be multiple, and those will be API and the client. So let's start up this. Yes, okay, and let's run this now. So my application is already wired up and it is giving the two bookings as a result, and that were the two bookings which I have in my DB. So let's quickly see that, and this is the two bookings which I have. And if you see, if I just refresh the page, it first goes into the client, user management client index page, user management get all result, and then it goes to the API call, user management.api, and gets all the bookings. So that's how it is coming. Now let's proceed and add the identity server using Duende identity server to the application. So the way we add the identity server, Duende identity server, is open the folder location here, and if you just go and open the PowerShell window here and just go ahead and type this command, like installing all the templates. Followed by, we'll create a new empty project, and we will name it as based on our channel name. So let it be 5-minute code.idp. So that is identity provider, 5-minute code IDP, and let's press enter. Now let's go back, let's go to the let's go ahead and add this project in our book my. So just go ahead and add an existing project here, book my board project. We stop this project from running now and add existing project, which is my 5-minute IDP project. Now this will be the identity provider for me, and if you see here, this has come with the basic setup and the basic wiring which comes here, especially starting with the program.cs. If you see, there are two parts to this. We have the configure services and the configure pipeline. If you see configure services, then it has all these basic setup in place, and then we have the configure pipeline, which has its own basic setup. So let's go ahead and do the further wiring of this identity provider setup. Earlier we'll be going ahead and adding we first go ahead and go inside the project. So cd 5-minute code and .idp, and here we will be running this command, which is to add the UI layer as well for the Duende identity server. So let's do that. Now if you see here, if you just check this one now, and if you just expand the pages, you will be seeing all the UI layers as well in here. So I have gone ahead and added the basic wiring for this Duende identity server. If you see here, the dependencies side, you have the Duende identity server 7.0.4, and then we have also the two files which are the basic configuration files. We have the identity resources as OpenID and profile. Identity resource, we have added the role, and also we have added the user management API, which we were just implementing right now. And the user management API has the scope of full access, and also we have added the API scope, the user management API full access scope, Along with that, we have configured the user management client project, the client project which was showing the booking listing, and then we have made the allowed grant types as code type. Also, these are some default values which comes in identity token lifetime 300 seconds, that is 5 minutes. Authorization code lifetime of 5 minutes here, based on whatever we have in our client project. So if you come to the client project, we will be having the UI URL, so 7212. So we'll need to put that in here along with the sign out URL, and then other things will remain pretty much the same. And we require consent, we are keeping it as true here. Similarly, for the hosting extension, we have added the two services, local user services and the user management client. The user management client is similar to what we had there, wherein what we are doing is we are trying to get a user and save a user. So whatever user we come through with the registration process will be saved, and also whatever users we have, we will be able to fetch it. So this is there in the client, which will talk to the API. And then we have is our local service. The local service is something which we will be using to fetch the different areas of the application, wherein we will be checking the user whether it is there. If it is not, we'll go ahead and add the user and things like that. So that is what it is plugged in into our identity provider, and that is something which we need to now plug it into our applications. So we'll go ahead and add those code. So let's go to the client and let's see that. So the client is running on 7212, and that is what the correction is here. And in the hosting extension, we have added the endpoint for the user management API to save the new user which comes in and registers for the first time. So that is one more change which is done. And let's go ahead and run this application and see the code walkthrough once. So let's go ahead and run this application and see how application works now. Before that, we will need to set up the multiple startup project here. Now I've configured 3 startup projects. One is the IDP project, the other is the API, and the client project. Now let's go ahead and run this. So as soon as our client application launches, you would be seeing something like this, wherein it is pointing to the identity server now rather than listing the number of bookings directly. So what happens internally is, as soon as the 7212, that is the client project which is hit, it gets redirected to the identity server, asking for the user credentials, as we have decorated the controller, the home controller, with the authorized attribute. So it goes and tries to find out who's logged in, and there was no login available, so it goes ahead and shows you the login page of the Duendy identity server. Since I have not logged, I don't have any user ID and password, I'm logging in the first time, so I'll go ahead, and since I haven't logged in before, so I will go ahead and click on not registered yet, and here I will go ahead and provide the details. Password will be the same, and then we will just go ahead and enter the details and click on register. As you see, it is correctly registered now, and it is navigating to the user management, the page wherein I am already logged in. It is asking for the consent. Now this is required because I have set it as required consent as true, which can be seen in the code in here. I'll just go back to the code and show you guys where will it be coming. So if you go to the config settings, and you see required consent is equal to true, so that gives the Duendy server a flag that it shows you the consent which is required to be passed on to the subsequent UI. So I click on yes, allow, and since I do not have any booking right now, I will not be able to get it. So but I do have a existing login. So what I will do is I will go ahead and provide that um, user ID and password, and we'll try to see if we are getting able to fetch the bookings for that user. Now I will try to use an existing user and see if it is able to fetch the details of the registration of the bookings which is done in that user's name. So I'm using the login now, and if you see yes, allow, should be able to see the bookings for that user. So if you see in here, you would be able to see the user's bookings, and that booking, if you see the view data, the first booking is what came up, B001, and that belongs to the user. If you can just see, the profile ID is 1 John, and the second and the booking was for that specific user ID 1. So that's how the whole process flows, wherein it goes through the identity provider, which in our case was 20 identity server. Then we have the client, and then we have the APIs through which it talks to. So this was the full implementation around identity server in conjunction with OAuth 2.0 and OpenID Connect. I hope you liked the video. If you liked the video, please press like and subscribe to the channel. Have a nice day.